this is Jonathan Wilson-Hartgrove. I'm here at the Rootla House in Durham, North Carolina. And as I'm thinking about Lent and the history of the practice of Lent in the church, one of the things I've been thinking about is the practice of silence. You know, we live in a noisy society. There's always lots of noise. There's the noise that goes on outside that we can hear, but there's also the noisiness of our lives and the noisiness of all this technology that always has us connected to people in all kinds of ways. And one of the things that the church encourages us to do in this season is to practice silence. And whenever I think about silence, I always remember the one real hermit that I ever had a chance to meet. Many years ago, a dear brother at a Benedictine monastery in Minnesota befriended me and befriended our community here. And I used to go and visit him. And once when I visited him, he told me that he wanted to take me to meet his spiritual director. And he carried me to a convalescence home for a women's community there in Minnesota and introduced me to a 94-year-old woman, Sister Jeremy Hall, who had been a hermit for 40 years. I'd never met a real hermit. I've met people who fashion themselves as introverts and call themselves hermit, but this is a woman who actually lived alone and practiced silence for 40 years. And what I was struck by in meeting her was how what an incredibly good listener she was. She wasn't someone who had disengaged from the world, but by practicing silence, by cutting off a lot of the noise that's extraneous to the heart of what we're called to. It was a woman who had learned how to pay attention, who had learned how to listen. And I don't know if I've ever been heard as well as I was heard in the 30 minutes or so that I met with that dear woman. It was a wonderful meeting, and she was right there. She understood everything that I said, and I'll never forget, I came home from that meeting. I wrote her a note to thank her for her time, and a couple weeks later, I got a letter back from one of her sisters that said between the time I visited her and the time my letter had arrived, she had died. And I was struck by how this woman who was so incredibly alive had slipped over into death that soon after our meeting. I think that's a little glimpse of what the practice of silence can mean for us. And so as we move on in this Lenten journey, as we look ahead towards Easter, I'd invite you to consider what role silence could play in helping you focus on the things that really matter.